Hello and welcome to Social Anxiety Life, the podcast. This is season 2, episode 9. Today we're excited to bring you an exclusive episode from the archives all about counselling and therapy. It's useful if you've listened to season 1, episode 9 about counselling and therapy before listening to this episode from the archives. We will be back soon for episode 10 after our summer break. Enjoy.
Also, I think for me years ago, therapy was something that I thought, and this is when I was much younger, therapy was something I thought you would have if something awful had happened. Like it was something you would have if something really bad had happened, or if you were like really, really struggling. But I actually know quite a few people who have therapy just because it just in general helps them. Like it helps them sort of day to day. I think it's just a really good thing.
It's quite liberating actually, because if you talk about something in particular and you sort of you're allowed to follow through your thought process with the counsellor in role as more of they're acknowledging that what you're saying is valid. Then they might ask a very little question, such as through their body language, they might be nodding away to you. That to me says, right, okay, that person is listening to me. They're acknowledging what I'm saying. That's a little thing, but that's really powerful. Or saying things like, yes, I understand. That's really good as well. It's amazing how I know people that don't do those things at all.
Yeah.
Because there are social situations where I can think of something, a recent example of a shop in Tesco's, for example. I was at the self-checkout bit. I like that bit because you could just get on with it. But I needed a bag. Now, the place where I was in the self-checkout, the person was at the other end of the self-checkout area. So I thought, right, I've got to get that person's attention somehow because I need a bag for all my things. So I spent quite a long time, even a minute or so, right, how am I going to get that person's attention? Right, I can't shout over there. I can't shout, give me a bag. I didn't want to leave my stuff and go to get them.
Yeah.
So I thought, right, okay, it has to be like looking or eye contact. So I looked, nothing. Then I waited, looked again. And yes, I said bag. I did a little gesture for bag. And they brought it over. But there was a little bit of social anxiety within that because I was worried that I wouldn't be able to get what I needed.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a bag.
Yes.
That's all I wanted was a bag. Yeah. And I had to use that particular self-checkout bit.
Yeah.
Because there was no other self-checkout till that I could use. So for me, I think the reason I spoke about that was I'm thinking that our friends or like acquaintances or there must be people that we know really well. Do we get value out of just talking to them about how we're feeling and our social anxiety?
Yeah.
As much as a counsellor, because a counsellor and therapist is the professional.
Yes.
But is there an argument to say, well, actually, people that know you really well, is that the same?
Yeah, I was going to say, because there's a few people in my life that I'm very comfortable talking to about my social anxiety, and I feel I can be quite open about it. Having said that, there are times where even with people that you're really close to, it can be a bit difficult talking about your anxiety, because I sometimes find I almost feel a little bit guilty about it because I don't want to keep going on about it, or I don't know how to explain it. It's just sometimes you feel like you don't want to keep banging on about it, even with someone that you're really close to that understands it. So I could imagine for me personally, the idea of someone I don't know who is a stranger listening to me talk about my social anxiety, I actually really like that idea, because I feel like maybe in some ways I'd almost feel more open about just being really brutally honest about the thoughts I have and how I feel in certain situations, and not have maybe this slight feeling of guilt that maybe I sometimes get.
Yeah, I have particular people that, very few people I can just say,
yeah,
because I know they get it and they don't judge. There's people that don't get it.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
And there's people who ask curious questions. Now, counsellors and therapists, I think, ask the curious questions, and they're really good at doing it. And my recent period of counselling, what's made it better than probably the other two sessions that I've had is sort of the stuff to take away with you.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually you come up with, they could just give you the strategies, but I think it's almost better that you come up with them as you're talking. So one strategy that I've been given that has worked really well is guided hypnotherapy.
Yeah.
So I've been given a link to a YouTube video, and it's 25 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
And I've tried up meditation, mindfulness, all that stuff before, and it's varied in the way that it's worked. So I listened to it, and I got about 5 minutes in, and I don't remember the rest of it.
Right. Wow.
And it's simply as, like, I went to bed quite late. We're talking after midnight here.
Mm.
And I thought, I can't sleep, so I'll try it. So I just put it on by the side of my bed. I purposely turned the lightness down, the brightness down, so I couldn't see it, but I could still hear it at the same time. And there's lots of phrases about, imagine you're here, etc. I thought, goodness me, this sounds terrible. I can't, it doesn't sound very good at all. But the more I go into it, I can imagine myself in the field. I can imagine myself under the tree with a nice little cool, refreshing drink.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of talk about, relax your body. This is your time. You're entitled to think these nice positive thoughts. Get rid of those anxious thoughts you have about what's happened during the day. And I could feel my body now, relaxing into the bed. Everything sort of felt lighter. So it actually ended up being a really good strategy that I use. And I say 90% of the time that works.
Yeah.
There's been the odd time where it hasn't worked, and I've got through the whole 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And I've listened to the end of it. I thought, I don't want to listen to the end. I should have been out like a light by then.
That's an important point, though, because you said you have tried those types of things before and it hasn't worked. So maybe it's about finding the specific one that works for you.
That's right. I think another thing that came out of therapy is another strategy that works really well for me is going out for a walk within nature. So a park, common, field, whatever you want to call it. That for me brings instant relief to anxiety.
Yeah.
And I'm not joking here. As soon as I see that greenery, everything lifts.
Mm.
And my counsellor was saying that there's specific things about nature, the park, the common, the specific things that have been proven to relieve the anxiety. So a detail that we probably see quite a lot within nature is that leaves have something called fractal patterns on them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the way that you have the line down the middle, the lines going off the side. There's something about seeing those particular patterns that's been proven to relieve your anxiety straight away.
Oh, wow.
There's something also about gardening, about being with the soil. That's supposed to give us some kind of friendly bacteria.
Okay.
So it's those sort of things which are now in my toolkit. And I wouldn't have come up with those myself.
Yeah.
They're things that I do, but I didn't quite realise the impact of those on the anxiety or social anxiety. That's been really good. It's now something that I recognise that works.
And that's all come out of the therapy.
Yes, there's been really positive thoughts and positive strategies that have come out of therapy. Something else that was recommended in a previous form of therapy was journaling.
Yes, that's a big one, I think.
Yeah. Have you ever tried anything like that?
I have, yeah. I think the longest I managed it for was maybe just under a year, and I would write every single day, and then it just kind of fell off after that. But for that year, it was useful, and it was actually quite nice to be able to go back and look at sort of previous periods of time and kind of see how my feelings were changing. And
so within that, because I've never tried journaling, is the idea that you're using that to write your thoughts, whether it's positive, negative thoughts.
Yeah, for me, it was just getting any thoughts I had down on the paper. So I would just have a general kind of how my day was, and very much I would try and think of a positive from the day, and then anything I'd found difficult during that day.
So something as simple as, if during the day I felt awkward or felt like a I'm going to say the word, I'm trying to think of the word now, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So say I felt uncomfortable
Mhm.
talking to someone on the
Yeah.
bus on the way to work, I would write down, I felt uncomfortable talking to, when someone spoke to me on the bus,
Yeah.
and I would write down how that made me feel.
You could do, yeah. And one of the important parts of it, though, was also writing down a positive. Because I think sometimes when you have those really, really bad days, it's so easy to focus on the negatives. So it was really important to write anything that you'd struggled with or found difficult, write it down, get it on the paper, really like write very openly and honestly about your feelings, because then you're getting it out. But also try and find a positive, because there is a positive in every day. And it was, even if it was a tiny thing like, oh, I got up this morning and had breakfast. Like if you're having one of those really difficult days and that's still your achievement, you'd write it down. So I did that for just under a year, and it was useful, and it was hard because there'd be days I'd miss and then I'd have to go back, or like, it's a lot to remember to do it every day, but I think it's one of those things that's going to work for some people and not for others.
Yeah, it's been suggested to me, but it's when the reason I didn't do it was because I probably couldn't give the time to it.
Yeah.
I know you can give it as little as five minutes.
Yeah.
But I just don't know whether it's the right, as you said, whether that's the right thing for me.
Yeah, and as you said, you've kind of got your, what would you call it, toolkit, your things that work well for you. So whether you would need to do that.
There's one sort of form of therapy that I've read about that I haven't had yet, and that's exposure therapy.
I have heard of it.
And my understanding of that is that you're literally exposed to the situation that your social anxiety is making you feel the most awkward or uncomfortable about. I just don't know. I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I could imagine. It makes sense, because I think the more you do something, the easier it gets. But the thought of going to therapy and them saying, right, parties give you anxiety, you're gonna go to loads of parties, that just immediately ramps my anxiety up massively.
It's almost triggering, because if whatever you're going to talk about or be exposed to, you're triggering the episode itself, which potentially, and if some people have had that already, then that potentially, I don't know whether that's the right way forward. It's almost like you need to accept that you're going to have anxiety or you're going to panic about certain things. But when it happens, it's almost like you have your ways of dealing with it.
Yeah.
It's like, you have your strategies, whether you go out or you have something, you talk to someone. Because the aim of therapy or counselling is ultimately to equip you with those strategies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's all about the coping mechanisms, because you're never going to completely rid yourself of the anxiety. But if you have those things that that work for you.
So interestingly, thinking of someone like Adele apparently, she had a lot of anxiety about going on stage and performing, which you wouldn't think that at all, which I know we've discussed before about assumptions, but she went through therapy to give her the strategies in order to be able to go onto stage and perform to thousands of people. So it's interesting that there's evidence from famous people to say that it works, and it's really interesting to read that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, a lot of people, famous people, I think, are now speaking out more about therapy and about the positive impacts of it, which is really important.
I think wrapping it up now for episode 9, that it's been quite an interesting sort of journey about counselling and therapy. It almost feels like it's gone along a particular, like the yellow brick road of the Wizard of Oz, and we've had little branches going off to the side of it.
Yeah.
So if you've listened to this podcast episode, please leave us a 5-star review on Spotify if you've enjoyed listening to it. We would appreciate feedback on your chosen podcast platform, and we would particularly welcome any comments about what you've heard.
Yes, and again, thank you to anyone who has already left a review or a rating.
Let us know if there's anything else you'd particularly like us to discuss. But thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon for episode 10.
Bye.
Bye-bye.